Welcome to the Chief Aim podcast. This is your weekly dose of real experiences, insights, strategies, and action steps for entrepreneurs who want to build and are building something incredible. All right, welcome back to the show. This is the show where we talk about all of the stuff that no one really wants to talk about because, you know, whenever you are, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, when you ask them how it's going, they're like, yeah, it's great, the best month ever. We're going all big guns, and you know full well that they're not, you know, and the reality is there's a lot of hard times, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that attacks mentality, finances, worry, fear, doubt, you know, and it's a continuous cycle of that, really. And, you know, every entrepreneur has gone through a stage where they've experienced or endured all of these things. So myself and Seb, we've both built different businesses at different parts of our lives. We've had, you know, we're still in the thick. We're still always building and, you know, seeking out new opportunities and building new businesses and seeking out new partnerships and all this kind of stuff. And it's just an ongoing journey. And what we thought would be valuable is to share of what goes on behind the scenes. So you guys seem to be getting value from these raw conversations so far. So Seb, what are we talking about this week?
Yeah, so we pretty much come up with these conversations on the spot, right? You know, we have a chat in the morning, you send me a message, or I send you a message and say, we're recording later. What should we talk about? And today, one of the things I suggested was we talk about risk versus safety, right? And the difference between the two. And I know we've kind of tiptoed around this in some of the other episodes we talked about, right? Where we talked about perception, we talked about approaching the entrepreneur journey kind of stoically, not getting wrapped up in the highs and the lows. But fear for me is one of those things that holds people back the most. You know, I was reading a few stats on fear earlier in the week, and fear is one of the things that prevents people from taking risk. Right. And just diving straight into some of those, it's something like fear of failure is the number one reason why people don't take risk. Right. So it's the outcome. It's not necessarily that the uncomfortability of doing the thing. It's the outcome not being successful in their eyes. Right. And so for me, the first major point there is the perception of what that outcome actually is. So you're starting a business, right? Well, fear of failure is the number one reason you don't take the risk to start the business. And so for me, it's like, well, okay, to determine what failure looks like. If you're going to find what failure looks like, it becomes so much easier to untap and understand that fear and then neutralize it a bit. I think that the big thing there is, you know, the end result is what? Because really, the way I see entrepreneur, and this goes in something we talked about before, is that kind of long-term pursuit, right? It's a way of life. It's a career. It's something that you kind of, this is how you choose to live your life. So there is no outcome. Like Alex Hormozy says, right? The game, this is just what you signed up to. And so I kind of feel like if you approach it that way, it dissolves the fear and you're more likely to make bigger decisions, riskier decisions. But let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, a lot of fear of the unknown. You know, many of my mentors that I've learnt from in the past have made me realize that actually there is no fear of the unknown. You can't fear the unknown. The fear is actually something real and tangible. So I was so fascinated with this concept that I actually interviewed or surveyed a ton of people in one of my networks, and I said, when it comes to business, you know, what are the top fears? And I think the top one was, you know, I'm not enough, I don't know enough, kind of that imposter syndrome. My product won't be valuable enough. The second one was it's already been done. There's too much competition. There's all that kind of stuff going on. The third one was, you know, fear of wasting time. They're not going to get the sales. They're not going to get they're going to be rejected, and they're going to be shown up to their partner and all their family and all the rest of it. And the last one, weirdly, was actually fear of success, like fear of like popularity and spotlight and all that kind of stuff. And when you look at those, it's like, well, you fear that one of those four things for a specific reason that is meaningful to you based on something that's you've either seen happen to someone else or has happened to you in the past, or you've seen in a film or something, because you have to have a specific fear to fear, right? You can't, otherwise, because a fear is an imagination. It's just a future thing. So once you realize what the four main fears are, you can start going, well, why do I fear success and popularity? And then you might realize, actually, my dad was like a big success, in a pop band in the 80s or something, and it caused our family hell. And, we had loads of paparazzi outside the door or something like that, right? Or he got too big for his boots and left my mum or something like that, and that'd be a fear of becoming popular and successful. Maybe you lose friends because you've got a load of money and people don't want to know you anymore. And that's a fear. And you've seen that happen to someone, but it will be something real. It will be something that's there and it's happened in your life. So it's really just understanding, as you say, you want to neutralize that. So the way that you do that is first pinpointing what that event was. Why do you have that fear?
It's kind of interesting to me. One of the things you touched on there is how fear can be passed down from generation to generation, right? And man, I've had so many deep dive conversations with you on bullying, because I've written books about it, and it's been a big part of my life, the amount of professional work I've done around it, right? And we've both done similar courses, Dr. DeMartini, all this sort of stuff, which touches on it, doesn't just touch on it, but goes deep dives on that. And for me, it's fascinating how with bullying, you can pass that on to your kids, right? So if you're insecure about something, you can, from your past where you were bullied, you can then pass it on to your kids, and they will experience the same thing. And one of the stories I've got there is I was interviewing a confidence coach, great confidence coach. And when she was younger, she was really insecure about the way she looked, and she was insecure about the what she wore, her weight, all this sort of stuff. And she was bullied because of that insecurity, right? She didn't own or love those specific traits about herself, and so she was bullied about that. And I said to her, why were you so insecure about it? She said, well, my mum used to tell me, you're not looking good in that, you're wearing the wrong clothes, you're overweight, all this sort of stuff, right? And so I said to her, go and speak to your mum and ask your mum if she was ever bullied. So she speaks to her mum. Her mum says, yeah, I was bullied. And the end of that conversation was that her mum was bullied for the way she looked, for her weight, for how she dressed, all that sort of stuff. And so the way I see bullying is like this dark shadow that follows you, right? And it follows you in your life because of the trauma you've gone through. And if you're not careful, you don't turn around and face that dark shadow and process it and relieve the trauma, people, you will then bring that onto your generation, and you the next generation, your kids and their kids, you'll have no idea you're doing it. And I think fear is exactly the same, right? It's a bit like, your grandma used to cook the steak the certain way, right? Or, the cook the roast dinner the certain way. So you've done it, and then the next generation have done it. And why do you do it that way when there's a better way of doing it? Well, that's just the way we do it. And you pass these things from generation to generation until you actually turn around and face them and challenge them. And fear is no different, right? You could have generations of people who are scared of something, and that could be scared of taking a risk, leaving their job to start a business, or pursuing something they really love, or whatever it is, right? And it's purely because no one in the previous 2 to 3 generations in their life could have turned around and processed that fear and asked why they're scared of it. But once you have that knowledge, it's now your responsibility to actually do that, right? Like it's our responsibility to process our own traumas, even if they're generational passed on to us, so that we don't pass it on to the next generation. So fear is no different for me. And it's interesting then, if you process those fears, how much more likely you are to take risk in your life.
Exactly. Yeah. So the risk is determined by your perception of fear and what you do and don't want to happen as a result of that fear. So, and the obvious thing is, like, there could be 2 people, one person believes in ghosts and one doesn't, right? And the person who doesn't believe in ghosts will have no problem sleeping in a dark room, whereas the person who believes in ghosts might be petrified of sleeping in a dark room. And it's exactly the same situation. It's just one's got a perception that there's these things exist, and there's something bad could happen to them as a result of what they've seen in a film. and one person hasn't seen that film and doesn't believe or doesn't know that it's even a thing. Therefore, the fear isn't there, and it's two people in the same situation. Same with jumping out of a plane, parachuting, gliding, base jumping, whatever you want to do.
I mean, it's amazing how just understanding those two perceptions, right? You're more, now you understand that, you're more likely to take the risk of being in the dark room, right?
Yeah.
If you can eradicate the concern about the imagination of what could go wrong, now you're more likely to take the risk. But you touched on base jumping there. Like, fear is a tool to keep you alive as well. So as much as we try and eliminate fear, in my opinion, it's such a useful tool for a human being to use, but it's got to be that way around. You've got to use fear rather than fear using you. And this is where I see people, you know, my life's been filled with professional fighting, extreme sports, base jumping, wingsuit base jumping, you know, where I would hear stories or have friends who have lost their life off the same cliff I'm jumping off the next day, right? And it's like some of these jumps we were doing were terrifying, and I would go on the edge of the cliff, and I could literally feel my legs shaking, right? And I feel calm in my head. My body's like, nope, and you know, you can't control it. Your legs are just shaking like this. Some people feel the same thing when they do public speaking and stuff. Arguably, it's more scary for a lot of people to do public speaking because it's social rejection. That's kind of another story. But yeah, the way I got through that was understanding that this is my body's response to what's going on around me, breathing through it. And if I couldn't calm my body down, I wouldn't jump. And ultimately, you know, it's if you're in a position where you can't control your fear, then I think that you're not ready for whatever it is you're doing, right? I used to, one of my mentors in base jumping used to get me to on flat land, normally just stand on one foot and breathe for 30 seconds, right? Anyone can stand on one foot and breathe for 30 seconds and balance and be relaxed. But you do that on the edge of a 3,000 foot drop exit point on the side of a cliff. Suddenly it's a little bit more tricky. But ultimately, if you can calm your mindset down to the same point as you were when you're on normal ground, then you're in the right place to make the right judgment, to make the right decisions and have the right reactions that you need in order to survive that. So I think the bottom line of being able to take risks, of being a risk taker, as people say, is having the ability to control fear, not removing fear, but having the ability to understand it, watch it, observe it, and control it, and use it when you need it to guide your decisions, right?
Yeah. So ultimately, your ability to take forget like calling it risk. I always like to prefer to call it calculated risk, because everything's a calculated risk, and the calculation of risk is based on that perception of fear. This is a quick shout out to the sponsor of this show, Shield, who help us deliver this podcast along with all the social media that goes with it to help us get it out to more people, which leaves us to focus on just creating more great conversations. If you want to start, delegate, or optimize your social media or podcast, or if you want to build your very own online course or program, get in touch with the team at shieldglobal.io. You know, whether you think something bad's going to happen to you, but the thing that you fear that's going to happen to you, is better to just get to grips with what that is and what the worst, we spoke about this last time, what's the worst that could happen, you know, and also once you realize what it was that did happen before, maybe your parents did split up or something like that. And that's, that's something that you've got this negative view on. What was the good that came out of that? Because there'll be good that came out of that. You know, there will be good in every situation. And once you start to identify the good that came out of that, a bit like when you were struggling in business in the pandemic, you know, what came out of that? You know, amazing things, right? It's like leaps and bounds. So there's always going to be good that comes out of it. And the more you can identify what good came out of it, the less that kind of fear creeps up. The lower you lower the fear, and then your calculated risk can expand. And you go, oh, okay, this is a good deal. You know, I should go in for this because it was great before.
No one wants to talk about the benefits of all the difficult times, right? When they're in the middle of a horrible situation, no one wants to be like, thank you, universe, for teaching me this lesson, which is now going to benefit my life, right? No one wants to thank the bully. I remember when I was running a workshop, and I went in, it was like, I found the solution. I know exactly how to help parents navigate bullying. And I stood up in front of 100 parents and I said, right, step one, you've got to forgive your child's bully. And I remember the room was just like, who is this guy? We're going through this emergency situation. Our children have been bullied for a long time. And I realized in that point, I'd kind of gone in with a vitamin instead of the paracetamol.
Esoteric.
Yeah. And I needed to step back a little bit and give them practical steps first, and then say, look, when you're ready, step 6 is perception. You're going to learn about the bigger picture here and how to prevent this bullying episode from turning into chronic bullying by having a deep understanding of where it's coming from, understanding that fear and so on. But yeah, very much so. Like I love how binary it is, right? And you're a classic trader in this. It's like if this then that, right? It's like all this negativity comes in. I'm going to fill up my pot A, with like 50 points of negativity, and out of pot B comes 50 points of positivity. And I know that's how your brain works. And so few people are able to approach a very emotional subject in that binary way. But I think that comes down to your trading background, to be honest, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, obviously that helps. Objectivity helps, but it is really just a practice of doing that over so many years. It's basically seeing the good and the bad as quickly as possible. And when you practice that over so many years, you see it quickly. You see it very, very quickly. But as this is about business specifically, with what in mind, where the biggest risk of starting a business or going into business or taking the next step in business is, I'm not enough. I don't know enough. My product won't be valuable enough. Too much competition, all that. What are some of the things, I guess, that I can share or you can share that I've kind of learnt to either help with that or dispel that? I think for me, firstly, if you're not enough or you really don't feel like you're enough, one of the things that you can do is just skill up, like learn, just go and research a little bit more about your particular area or your niche until you've really got confidence that you know what you're talking about. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to learn like have to be like a PhD. You just have to know enough to overcome a problem. And then there's going to be a ton of people underneath you who would love to overcome that problem. So, think about it this way. If you was going to go and talk to a classroom of kindergarten kids, a nursery of kids, 3-5-year-olds, you probably wouldn't be very nervous. Whereas if you go and do a talk on stage about your particular topic, you might be thinking there's going to be someone there that knows a bit more about this than me and what have you. But in actual fact, what I always tend to do when I'm delivering pieces of content or talking or trying to kind of grow in social leadership, I just basically imagine the audience as one person. Everyone's seeing you from their own perspective. There isn't actually 200 people there. There's just lots of one people there. And that really helps, because it's just, they're going to take from you what they take from you, and the person next to them will take from you what they take from you. And it's not all of a sudden it's like, oh, right, okay, well, I'm just talking to one person, really.
That's a really good point. I think social rejection is one of the greatest fears people have, right? It's one of the biggest driving forces for not taking risk. And I know we're talking a lot about fear because if you solve the problem of fear, you take more risk, right? Which is why we're talking so much about it, because it's basically the antidote, understanding and processing fear. But I love the concept of someone would listen to this, chat we're having and go away with 3 things, right? Which they implement, and it's like immediately they know they can use something from this to improve. And I think for me, one of the things I would say is whenever I've mentored people through encouraging them to take more risk, obviously you do what you can to limit the fear. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. It might not, but the reality there is, how do you go from someone who's not a risk taker, right, who hates taking risk, to someone who's now comfortable taking risks? And for me personally, like when I first started doing extreme sports, if you told me to jump off a cliff, the answer would be no, there's no way I'd do it. But one of the things I always say to everyone is you can get used to anything. It got to a point where I was doing 10 jumps a day off cliffs and it was just completely normal. I was doing 10 jumps out of planes every day. It was normal. You can get used to anything. And so what I would say to people is, put out a series of steps. If this is the big risk, right? Put out a series. Maybe there's 10 steps to get to that big risk. As you said about, let's give the example of speaking on stage to 100 people, right? So step 1 could be speaking to yourself. Get so comfortable with speaking to yourself in a mirror or on camera, on your phone every single day. Deliver your speech to yourself for 1 minute, right? Step 2 could be posting that on social media, getting so used to doing that for a week or two. Step 3 could be saying that speech to your partner or to someone you trust, like a friend, right? Step 4 could be have a small group of people. So it's getting used to these different stages. It's small steps towards the big goal. I think that's one of the best ways to eliminate fear, because ultimately risk-taking is then a learned behavior. So I kind of look at risk-taking like, once you understand the process, understand how it works, you can apply it to different things. And ultimately for me, those who understand risk-taking, calculated risk, they know how to do their due diligence on something, understand if it's worth it or not, and then the steps they need in order to take the jump and take the risk. They're the ones who progress the fastest in any area or field, whether it's sport, business, personal life, whatever it is. Those who take the biggest risks, calculated risks, are the ones who get the biggest reward. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely. And I think if you're, I totally agree with what you're saying about get comfortable, push your boundaries and rise to that new comfort level, that new tested comfort level. And one of the things I also want to touch on with a business thing is, if you have got because this is a big one, it's risky because no one will buy it, or this is one of the biggest ones that I've seen. No one will buy my thing. It's not valuable enough. It's not really something that's I don't have the confidence to charge for it and all this kind of stuff. As you know, the way that I build products personally is all built to demand. There's no guesswork involved. There's no this is a good idea, I might just go and launch one of these. It's all based on surveys and asking questions and getting in front of people and saying, what do you need? And they go, this would be great. I've really struggled with this. Great. How much would you pay from that? And would you buy it from me? And then you're literally like, you've got a guaranteed sale. And when you can do it that way and you build to demand, you've got so much confidence because the sale's already there. And
you know what you're doing there, right?
Where you can even get pre-sales and pay for the thing to be built in the first place. And
from a risk-taking point of view, you're just strategically reducing the downside,
reducing the risk.
Right. Yeah. Like if the risk feels too much, look at it strategically. What can you actually do to reduce that risk?
Strip away. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of them could be, well, the risk is that no one's going to buy it. Okay. Well, get a list of people who want to buy it. The risk is
ask if people buy it.
The risk is people might find it too expensive. Get a list of people with an idea from them of how much they want to pay. Cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
The risk is that you've hired someone for the day who may not turn up. Have another backup. Right. So for me, it's like, if we were going to narrow this down to just a few points, it'd probably be strategically reduce the risk so the risk is smaller. It would be take small steps with the concept of you can get used to anything. So take 10 small steps towards the risk. I would say find a mentor who's done it before, because there's a lot of little pitfalls that you won't understand, but they can help you with the first 2 points, right? They can help you with those small steps and reducing the risk. And what was the other one that we mentioned? You mentioned one at the very beginning.
No sales, fear of success, spotlight, popularity. I'm not enough. My product won't be enough.
Do you know what? Let's keep it at those 3, because that's the power of 3, right? If we give it 4, as soon as we give everyone 4 points, they're not going to implement anything.
That's true.
So if we keep it to 3, they should implement all 3 things. So
that's true.
Go on.
I was going to say that just to kind of wrap up on those as a whole. I just want to say as well, and it comes back to what you said about bullying and your, loving yourself and things like that. I think there's tremendous power in openly admitting where you're at and loving where you're at right now, and just not pretending that you're ahead of anyone. Just like when I started trading, I was at a level where I was trading successfully, but I just opened up my trading account and said, this is how I trade. And I opened out to 50 people, 60 people, and I was just trading my account in front of them. And that's that level of vulnerability. When you have that, your self-expectation dissolves a little bit, and you're just accepting for where you are at in this journey. People get a lot of value from that. People love following the journey.
your level of self expectation goes down. That's basically linking back to the primary fear everyone's got, right? Which is fear of failure, linked to fear of social rejection. So that's a brilliant antidote, actually, right?
Yeah.
What you just suggested to reduce the biggest fear that people have is transparency. You know, being transparent with where you're at, where you're going, what you're struggling with. And you'll also find that you start to build a bit of a tribe. Other people are likely experiencing the same thing. And just, sometimes sharing a worry or concern neutralizes it as well. You kind of, even if you're doing separate things, it's got this kind of, we're in this together, you're going to get through it together, camaraderie, which often helps, right?
Whenever you see the successful people, they always kind of be the brunt of the joke. They always put themselves down. I think Eminem, I think I heard someone say it's about Eminem the other day when he's like, when he does the rap battle, he just puts himself down on the rap battle straight away. There's nothing, like there's no upside.
What are you going to say?
What are you going to say now? And I think that there's a lot of power in doing that, just accepting where you are. I always introduce myself as like probably the most, the less academic in the room or the idiot or whatever. And it just breaks the ice, makes everyone on your page, and the expectation goes down. And then you can deliver value with confidence. So that helps. That's something that I do a lot.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And that's a great scene, actually, that 8 Mile scene. You can do the same thing in business as well. When your competition criticize you in business, right? We've had this in the past. Someone had criticized us for something, and we just kind of stood up and said, "Yep, they're completely right. That's what we do, and we do that because of the masses of years of experience we've got, the 30,000 people we've taught, and we know that's the best way to do it." So, you just
never criticize any competition or anything like that. Never, because every time you criticize, you're basically judging, and then you're basically saying, well, you're raising expectations of you straight away, right? So it's like, why do that to yourself? Why shoot yourself in the foot? Just don't do it. Like sooner, the typical one for that was the old PVC window salesman. They'd come round, and as soon as who put these in, and it's like straight away, I'm just not interested. It's like, come on, man, that's a cheap shot. You're gonna start by selling your business by putting down the other business. Well, that's a cheap blow. And my expectations instantly are higher of this guy and what he's going to deliver. And I'll be looking, for a fine comb, just like I'll be ripping the arse out of the guy. It's like, well, come on, mate, you can't make these mistakes. It's not worth it. So anyway, we're hitting the half-hour mark. So I think that's
okay, cool. Good session. We should wrap up. I think that was a valuable, coffee chat for anyone who came by.
Definitely
was maybe stuck with making a decision, right? And maybe stuck with taking a risk. It's you can get better and better at risk taking, even if you don't think you're a risk taker. You can get used to anything. I think finding the right mentor who's done it before, taking small steps, being transparent with where you're at. And reducing the risk, reducing the downside strategically, all those things coming together, will make massive change.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a great way to round up. And if you guys, you'll notice that we're doing this verses kind of series at the moment. If you got any verses that you'd like us to do, let us know in the comments. And until next week, thanks for tuning in again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care. If you're enjoying these podcasts, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're really getting value from these, we'd really love it if you could let us know on our review page. We'll see you next week.